The fluorescent lights of San Francisco Children's Hospital hummed softly as Dr. Sophia Bennett adjusted her surgical mask and reviewed the incoming case files. At 32, she had built a reputation as one of the finest pediatric surgeons. On the West Coast, her steady hands and compassionate heart making her a favorite among families facing their darkest hours. The evening shift was usually quieter, but tonight felt different somehow. "Dr. Bennett, we have an emergency appendectomy." Coming in called Nurse Patricia from the desk. 8-year-old boy, presenting with acute abdominal pain and fever. The ambulance should arrive in 10 minutes. Sophia nodded, already mentally preparing for the procedure. Pediatric appendectomies were routine for her, but every child deserved her complete attention and skill. She gathered her team and headed toward the emergency bay. Her mind focused on the task ahead. A mother's fear, Rebecca Torres, clutched her son's small hand as the ambulance raced through the San Francisco streets. James lay on the stretcher, his normally bright eyes clouded with pain and fever. At 29, Rebecca had learned to be strong for her son, raising him alone since birth while working as a nurse at a community clinic. She had seen enough medical emergencies to recognize the signs of appendicitis. But knowing what was happening didn't make watching her child suffer any easier. "Mama, it hurts," James whispered, his voice barely audible over the siren. "I know, baby. The doctors are going to help you feel better. Just hold on for me, okay?" Rebecca brushed his dark hair from his forehead, noting how much he looked like his father in moments like these. She had spent 8 years trying to forget those familiar features, but they stared back at her from her son's face every day. The ambulance pulled into the hospital bay with a screech of brakes. Rebecca had specifically requested this hospital because of its excellent pediatric program, never imagining that fate might have other plans for tonight. The collision of past and present as the medical team wheeled James into the emergency room. Rebecca stayed close by his side, rattling off his medical history to the intake nurse. She was so focused on her son that she didn't notice the tall figure in scrubs approaching until a familiar voice cut through her concentration like a knife. "Mrs. Torres, I'm Dr. Bennett. I'll be performing your son's surgery tonight." Rebecca's world stopped. She looked up slowly, her breath catching in her throat as she met the eyes she had once known so well. Sophia stood frozen as well, her professional composure wavering for just a moment as recognition dawned on both women. "Rebecca," Sophia whispered, almost inaudibly. "Sophie." The name escaped Rebecca's lips like a prayer and a curse combined. The two women stared at each other across the hospital bed where James lay. 8 years of separation and unspoken truths hanging heavy in the sterile air between them. The bustling emergency room seemed to fade away, leaving only the echo of their shared past and the small boy who connected them in ways neither had expected. Memories resurfaced. Sophia's mind raced back to their college days at UC Davis. She and Rebecca had been inseparable during their pre-med studies, study partners who had become best friends and eventually something more. Their relationship had been intense but brief, ending abruptly when Sophia received an opportunity to study abroad in London during their senior year. They had promised to stay in touch, but life had pulled them in different directions. Rebecca remembered those same days differently. She remembered the morning sickness that had started just weeks after Sophia left for England. She remembered the difficult decision to drop out of medical school and the lonely months that followed. She remembered giving birth to James and seeing Sophia's eyes looking back at her from her newborn son's face. "Mama, who is the doctor lady?" James asked weakly, breaking the spell that had fallen over the adults. Rebecca knelt beside her son's bed, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed his hair. "This is Dr. Bennett, sweetheart. She's going to help make your tummy feel better." Sophia forced herself back into professional mode, though her hands shook as she examined James. The boy's symptoms were classic appendicitis, requiring immediate surgical intervention. But as she looked at his face, really looked at him for the first time, her breath caught in her throat. Professional duty versus personal shock, the resemblance was unmistakable. James had Sophia's distinctive green eyes, the same stubborn cowlick in his dark hair that she had battled every morning, and even the same slight dimple in his left cheek when he attempted a brave smile despite his pain. The timeline matched perfectly with when she and Rebecca had been together. "We need to get him to surgery immediately," Sophia managed to say, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "The appendix appears to be near rupture." Rebecca nodded, signing the consent forms with shaking hands. "Please, just save my son." As the surgical team prepared James for the operating room, Sophia pulled Rebecca aside. They stepped into a small consultation room, the door closing behind them with a soft click that seemed to seal them away from the rest of the world. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Sophia began, her voice barely above a whisper.
Oh.
"Not now, Sophie. Please, just focus on James. Whatever questions you have, whatever you think you know, it can wait. He needs you to be the doctor right now, not—" Rebecca's voice broke. "Not what? Not his father?" The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. The weight of truth, Sophia, sank into one of the consultation room chairs, her mind reeling. "How long have you known?" "Since the day he was born," Rebecca admitted, finally meeting Sophia's eyes. "I tried to find you, to tell you. But you had moved to London, then 2 residency programs across the country. By the time I tracked down your contact information, years had passed. I convinced myself that you had built a new life, that maybe it was better this way." "Better." Sophia's voice rose slightly. "Rebecca, do you have any idea what you've kept?" "From me? From him?" "I kept him safe," Rebecca replied fiercely. "I gave him stability and love, and a chance at a normal life. What could you have given him from thousands of miles away, buried in medical school and residency programs?" The accusation stung because Sophia knew there was truth in it. Her path to becoming a surgeon had been all-consuming. She had sacrificed relationships, friendships, and any semblance of work-life balance in pursuit of her career goals. Would she have been ready to be a parent at 24? The surgery decision knock on the door interrupted their tense conversation. Dr. Bennett called Nurse Patricia. "The patient is prepped and ready. His white blood cell count is climbing rapidly." Sophia stood immediately, her professional instincts overriding her personal turmoil. Whatever revelations had just shattered her world would have to wait. James needed surgery now, and she was the best pediatric surgeon available tonight. "We finish this conversation later," she told Rebecca firmly. "Right now, I have a little boy to save." As Sophia scrubbed in for surgery, her hands moved through the familiar routine, while her mind processed the evening's revelations. The child lying on the operating table was her son. The boy she had never known existed was depending on her skills to save his life. The irony was not lost on her that medicine, which had once separated her from Rebecca, was now the thing that had brought them back together. Rebecca's vigil in the surgical waiting room. Rebecca paced the worn linoleum floors, her nursing uniform still wrinkled from the long shift she had just finished when James became ill. Other families sat quietly in clusters of chairs, some sleeping, others staring at outdated magazines without really seeing them. But Rebecca couldn't sit still. Her son was in surgery, and the surgeon operating on him was the woman she had loved and lost 8 years ago. She thought about all the times James had asked about his father, how she had given him gentle but vague answers about sometimes families looking different, and that love was what really mattered. She had never outright lied, but she had never told him the complete truth either. How do you explain to a child that his other parent doesn't know he exists? A volunteer approached with coffee and a gentle smile. "First time here?" she asked kindly. "Yes," Rebecca managed. "My son is having his appendix removed." "Dr. Bennett is excellent. Your boy is in the best possible hands." Only she knew, Rebecca thought wryly. The irony of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. The hands that had once traced patterns on her skin, that had held her through late-night study sessions and whispered promises of forever, were now the same hands working to save their child's life. The complexity of timing as the surgery stretched into its second hour, Rebecca found herself remembering the night James was conceived. It had been during finals week of their senior year, stress and exhaustion giving way to desperate passion in Sophia's tiny apartment. They had talked about their future, about matching to the same residency program, about building a life together after graduation. But then the opportunity in London had come up, a chance for Sophia to work with one of the world's leading pediatric surgical teams. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, one that Rebecca had insisted Sophia take despite her own breaking heart. Neither of them had known about the life they had created together that night. Rebecca had discovered her pregnancy just 3 weeks after Sophia left for England. The morning sickness had hit her during a biochemistry exam, sending her running to the bathroom where she had barely made it to a stall before losing her breakfast. The pregnancy test she took that afternoon had changed everything. She had tried to call Sophia, but the time difference and Sophia's intense schedule at the London hospital made communication nearly impossible. Their relationship had already been strained by the distance, and Rebecca couldn't bring herself to deliver such life-changing news through a crackling international phone connection. As the weeks turned to months and her pregnancy progressed, Rebecca had made the difficult decision to take a leave of absence from medical school. She told herself it was temporary, that she would return after the baby was born. But reality had other plans. Single motherhood, even with the support of her family, had made returning to the demanding schedule of medical school impossible. The surgery continued, and Rebecca continued to wait, each minute feeling like an hour. As she grappled with the magnitude of what tonight might mean for all of their lives, inside the operating room, Sophia's world had narrowed to the small body on the table and the delicate work her hands were performing. The appendix was more inflamed than the initial scans had indicated, and what should have been a routine laparoscopic procedure had become a complex open surgery. Her surgical team worked with quiet efficiency, but Sophia could feel the weight of every decision she made. "Suction here," she instructed her resident, Dr. Martinez, as they carefully separated the infected appendix from surrounding tissue. "The inflammation has spread more than we anticipated." Despite her professional focus, Sophia's mind kept drifting to the revelation that had shattered her world just hours earlier. This wasn't just another patient. This was James, her son, a child whose existence had been hidden from her for 8 years. Every careful cut, every precise suture carried the weight of a relationship she had never known existed. "Heart rate is climbing, doctor," announced the anesthesiologist. "Blood pressure is dropping." Sophia's hands never paused in their work, but her pulse quickened. Complications during pediatric surgery were every surgeon's nightmare. But when the child on the table was your own, the stakes became unbearable. Rebecca's breaking point in the waiting room. Rebecca had given up all pretense of sitting calmly. She paced the length of the room repeatedly, nurse's training allowing her to read the subtle signs that something wasn't going as planned. The surgery had been going on for nearly 3 hours now, far longer than a typical appendectomy should take. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother asking for updates. Rebecca stared at the screen, unsure how to even begin explaining the situation. How do you tell your family that the child they helped you raise might be meeting his other parent for the first time? And that other parent doesn't even know what role she's playing in this moment. Mrs. Torres, a young resident, approached her with a clipboard. "I need to update some information in your son's file. Is there any family medical history we should be aware of?" This simple question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. James's medical file was incomplete, containing only half of his genetic history. She had always listed unknown for paternal medical history, a reminder of the secret she had kept for so many years. "Actually," Rebecca began slowly, "there might be some information I need to provide about his father's side of the family." The genetic connection back in the operating room, Sophia was fighting to control a situation that was rapidly becoming more complex. The appendix had perforated, spilling infected material into James's abdominal cavity, which should have been a straightforward procedure was now a race against sepsis. "We need to irrigate thoroughly," she told her team, "but I want cultures sent to the lab immediately." As she worked, Sophia found herself thinking about her own medical history, the genetic predispositions that might affect this child. She had always been healthy, but her family had a history of autoimmune conditions that could complicate recovery from infection. Did Rebecca know about these risks? "Doctor, his temperature is spiking," the surgical nurse reported. Sophia made a quick decision. "Start broad-spectrum antibiotics. And get me Dr. Chen from infectious disease on the phone." The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now actively considering genetic factors that she should have known about this child from birth. 8 years of medical history, family genetic patterns, and hereditary risk factors had all been unknown. To her until tonight, Rebecca's confession able to bear the waiting any longer. Rebecca approached the surgical desk, where Nurse Patricia was monitoring the ongoing procedures. "How much longer?" Rebecca asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Dr. Bennett will update you as soon as she can," Patricia replied kindly. "These things sometimes take longer than expected." Rebecca took a deep breath, making a decision that terrified her. "I need to speak with someone about updating James's medical history. There's information about his father that might be relevant to his care." Patricia looked up with interest. "Of course, Dr. Martinez can speak with you when he has a moment." "Actually," Rebecca said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "I think Dr. Bennett needs to hear this directly. It's about his genetic history, and it might affect how she treats him." Something in Rebecca's tone must have conveyed the urgency of the situation because Patricia picked up the phone immediately. "I'll see if she can spare a moment between procedures." The moment of truth. 20 minutes later, Sophia emerged from the operating room, still in her surgical gown, but with her mask pulled down. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and concern, and Rebecca's heart clenched at seeing the woman she had once loved looking so worried about their son. "The surgery is more complicated than we initially thought," Sophia began without preamble. "The appendix had perforated, and we're dealing with some infection in the abdominal cavity. I need to know about any family history that might affect his recovery, particularly any autoimmune conditions or problems with healing." Rebecca's hands twisted together nervously. "Sophie, there's something I need to tell you about his medical history, about his genetics." "Go ahead," Sophia said, though something in Rebecca's tone made her tense. "His father," Rebecca began, then stopped and started again. "James inherited some genetic markers that you need to know about. Specifically, there's a family history of inflammatory conditions that could complicate infection recovery." Sophia stared at her for a moment, processing not just the medical information, but the way Rebecca was delivering it. "Rebecca, whose family history are we talking about?" Rebecca met her eyes directly for the first time since their reunion. "Yours, Sophie. We're talking about your family's medical history." "Good!" The genetic revelation, the confession hung in the air. Between them, like a bridge, neither woman was sure they were ready to cross. Sophia felt the world shift around her as the full implications of Rebecca's words sank in. "My grandmother had lupus," Sophia said slowly, her medical training automatically cataloging the relevant information. "My aunt has rheumatoid arthritis. There's a genetic marker for autoimmune conditions that runs in my family." "I know," Rebecca whispered. "I remember you talking about it during our genetics class. I've been watching for signs in James his whole life." Sophia's mind raced through the implications. Has he shown any symptoms? Joint pain, unexplained fevers, skin rashes? "Minor things," Rebecca admitted. "Nothing that seemed significant on its own, but now, with this infection—" "We need to run additional tests," Sophia said immediately. "Inflammatory markers, autoimmune panels. If his immune system is compromised by genetic factors, it could explain why the infection spread so quickly." The two women stood in the sterile hallway, suddenly united by their shared concern for James. The professional barrier temporarily dissolved by parental instinct. "Understanding the past, I need to get back to surgery," Sophia said, but she hesitated before turning away. "Rebecca, after this is over, we need to talk. Really talk. About everything." Rebecca nodded, tears finally spilling over. "No, I've wanted to tell you for so many years, but the longer I waited, the harder it became." "Did you really try? To find me?" Sophia asked softly. "Every way I could think of." "You were in London, then Boston, then here. By the time I tracked you down to San Francisco, James was already 4 years old. I told myself maybe it was better if I didn't disrupt your life." Sophia's expression softened slightly. "My life, Rebecca. He's my son, too. Do you have any idea what it feels like to discover you've missed 8 years of your child's life?" "I know," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "I know, and I'm sorry. I was 21 and scared and alone. I made the best decisions I could with what I knew at the time." Back to surgery, Sophia returned to the operating room with new information and renewed determination. The genetic factors Rebecca had revealed explained some of the complications they were seeing, and she was able to adjust James's treatment accordingly. "Dr. Martinez," she called to her resident, "I want you to add immune function tests to his post-op labs and contact genetics for a consult tomorrow." "Any particular concerns?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Family history of autoimmune conditions," Sophia replied, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Family history. As she continued working to clean out the infection and repair the damage, Sophia found herself really looking at James for the first time. Beyond the medical emergency, beyond the shocking revelation, she saw a little boy who had her stubborn cowlick and her grandmother's distinctive green eyes. She saw traces of her own childhood photos in his sleeping face. Rebecca's vigil continues back in the waiting room. Rebecca had finally called her mother to explain, at least partially, what was happening. She couldn't bring herself to reveal the full truth over the phone, but she needed someone to know where she was and why she might not be home tonight. "Is there anything I can do?" her mother had asked. "Pray," Rebecca had whispered. "Just pray that he comes through this okay." The night wore on. Rebecca found herself thinking about all the moments Sophia had missed. James's first steps, his first word, which had been Mama. His first day of school, when he had been so brave, despite being nervous. The time he had broken his arm, falling from a tree, and had insisted he was fine, even as tears streamed down. His face. All the little moments that make up a childhood. All the memories that Sophia would never have. But she also thought about the moments that were yet to come. If James survived this surgery, if they could find a way to navigate this impossible situation, maybe there could be new memories. Maybe it wasn't too late for Sophia to know her son. The turning point for hours into the surgery, the tide began to turn. The antibiotics were working, James's vital signs were stabilizing, and Sophia was finally able to complete the appendectomy. The infection was under control, and while recovery would be longer than typical, the immediate danger had passed. "He's going to be okay," Sophia announced to her surgical team, relief evident in her voice, as they prepared to close the incision. Sophia took a moment to really look at her son, who was small for his age, she noted clinically, but his muscle tone was good, and his overall health seemed strong. He had weathered a serious medical crisis with the resilience that she recognized from her own childhood. "Beautiful work, Dr. Bennett," Dr. Martinez commented as they finished the final sutures. "Thank you," Sophia replied, but her mind was already moving beyond the technical aspects of the surgery to the conversation that awaited her. With Rebecca, the recovery room, James was wheeled into the pediatric recovery room. Just as dawn was beginning to break over San Francisco, Rebecca was allowed to sit beside his bed while he slowly emerged from anesthesia, and she held his small hand as his eyes fluttered open. "Mama," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "I'm here, baby. You're all better now." "Doctors fixed your tummy?" Sophia appeared in the doorway, having changed out of her surgical gown into regular scrubs. She watched quietly as James gradually became more alert, noting his responses and checking his vital signs with professional thoroughness. "The surgery went well," she told Rebecca softly. "We had some complications, but he's going to make a full recovery." James turned his head toward Sophia's voice, studying her with curious eyes. "Are you the doctor who made my tummy better?" Sophia replied, her voice gentle as she approached the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," James admitted, "but better. Mama was scared, but I told her doctors are really smart, and you would help me." Sophia glanced at Rebecca, seeing the tears in her eyes. "Your mama was right to be worried about you. You were pretty sick, but you're going to be just fine." As James drifted back to sleep, the two women stood on opposite sides of his hospital bed, connected by the child between them and separated by 8 years of secrets and silence. The morning sun streamed through the recovery room windows, illuminating a scene that would have been impossible to imagine just 24 hours earlier. A family, broken by time and circumstance, brought together by crisis and bound by love. They were only beginning to understand. The pediatric recovery ward was quiet in the early morning hours, with only the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle whisper of air conditioning disturbing the peace. James had been sleeping soundly for several hours, his small chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of healing. Rebecca sat in the bedside chair, having refused to leave despite the nurses' suggestions that she'll get some rest at home. Sophia appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. She had been making rounds since 6 in the morning, checking on her other patients. But her thoughts kept returning to room 314, where her son lay recovering from surgery she had performed with her own hands. "I thought you might need this," Sophia said quietly, offering Rebecca one of the cups. Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "Thank you. I wasn't sure if you would come back." "He's my patient," Sophia replied, then paused. "And apparently he's more than that." The 2 women sat in silence for a moment, watching James sleep. In the morning light, the resemblance between him and Sophia was even more pronounced. The shape of his eyebrows, the way his mouth curved slightly even in sleep, the stubborn angle of his chin that spoke of determination inherited from his surgeon parent. First, questions James stirred as the morning sounds of the hospital began to increase around them. His eyes opened slowly, still cloudy with pain medication, but more alert than he had been the night before. "Mama," he said softly, "is the nice doctor lady still here?" Sophia stepped closer to the bed. "I'm right here." "James, how are you feeling this morning?" "My tummy hurts, but not as bad as before," he said honestly. "Are you going to take care of me until I get better?" "I'll be checking on you every day until you're ready to go home," Sophia promised. "Do you have any questions about what happened?" To you, James considered this with the seriousness that only children can bring to important matters. "Mama said my appendix was sick and you had to take it out. Will I be okay without it?" "You'll be perfectly fine," Sophia assured him. "Lots of people have their appendix removed and they live completely normal, healthy lives afterward. Even kids like me, especially kids like you," Sophia said, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. Rebecca's dilemma later that morning. While James was napping again, Sophia and Rebecca found themselves in the small family consultation room where their world had changed the night before. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows made everything seem more real and immediate than it had in the surreal atmosphere of the emergency surgery. "We need to talk about what happens next," Sophia began, her voice carefully controlled. Rebecca nodded, though she looked like she might be sick. "I know. I just don't know where to start." "Start with the truth," Sophia said simply. "All of it. When you found out you were pregnant, what you went through, what you've told James about his father." Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I found out 3 weeks after you left for London. I was throwing up during a biochemistry exam, and I knew immediately what was happening. I tried to call you, but the time difference in your schedule made it impossible to reach you. You could have left a message. You could have sent an email and said what?" Rebecca's voice rose slightly. "Sophie, congratulations on your dream. Opportunity, by the way. I'm pregnant with your child, and my life is falling apart." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing this. "So you made the decision alone." "I made a lot of decisions alone. I took a leave of absence from medical school, thinking I could go back after the baby was born. My parents helped financially, but it wasn't easy. Single motherhood isn't exactly compatible with the demands of medical school." "The lost years tell me about him," Sophia said quietly. "Tell me about James. What was he like as a baby? When did he start walking? What's his favorite subject in school?" Rebecca's expression softened as she began to share the memories she had guarded so carefully for 8 years. "He was the most beautiful baby. He hardly ever cried, just looked at everything with these enormous green eyes like he was trying to figure out the whole world. He started walking at 10 months, which terrified me because he had no sense of danger." Sophia found herself smiling despite the pain of having missed these moments. "That sounds familiar. I apparently gave my parents gray hair with my fearless approach to climbing everything in sight." "He's incredibly smart," Rebecca continued. "He taught himself to read when he was 4, and he's obsessed with science. He wants to be a doctor when he grows up, just like—" She stopped abruptly. "Just like his mama," Sophia finished softly. "Because that's what he calls you when he talks about wanting to be a doctor, isn't it?" Rebecca nodded, tears starting to fall. "I never told him he couldn't be anything he wanted to be. But I also never told him that medicine runs in both sides of his family. James's curiosity that afternoon. When James was feeling stronger, his natural curiosity began to emerge. He peppered Sophia with questions about the surgery, about how doctors learn to fix people, about whether being a doctor was scary. Sometimes, it's scary, Sophia admitted honestly. When someone you care about is sick, it can be very frightening. But that's also what makes doctors want to do their very best work. Were you scared when you had to fix me? James asked with the directness that only children possess. Sophia glanced at Rebecca, who was listening intently to their conversation. Yes, I was scared. You were very sick, and I wanted to make sure you got completely better. Achira. Really good doctor, right? Mama said you were one of the best doctors in the whole hospital. Try to be the best doctor I can be for every child I take care of, Sophia replied carefully. James studied her with those penetrating green eyes that were so familiar it made Sophia's chest ache. Do you have kids of your own, Dr. Bennett? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Rebecca tensed, waiting to see how Sophia would respond to this innocent inquiry that cut straight to the heart of their situation. That's a complicated question, James, Sophia said finally. But I can tell you that taking care of children like you is the most important work I do. Family Dynamics. Rebecca's mother, Rebecca Torres, arrived that evening to visit James. She was a small, energetic woman in her mid-50s who had been Rebecca's primary support system throughout James's childhood. Patricia had raised questions over the years about James's father, but Rebecca had always deflected them with vague explanations about a relationship that hadn't worked out. Mijo, how are you feeling? Patricia asked, kissing James's forehead and speaking to him in the mixture of English and Spanish that had been the soundtrack of his childhood. I'm better, abuela. The doctor took out the sick part, and now I'm going to be all fine. Patricia looked around the room, noting the additional medical equipment and the fact that they were in the private recovery ward rather than the standard pediatric unit. This is a very fancy room for an appendectomy, she observed. Dr. Bennett wanted to make sure James had everything he needed for a smooth recovery, Rebecca explained, avoiding her mother's questioning look when Sophia appeared for evening rounds. Patricia watched the interaction between the doctor and her grandson with the shrewd eyes of a woman who had raised 5 children of her own. Recognition? James has been asking when he can go back to school, Rebecca told Sophia as she checked. His incision. He doesn't want to miss too much of his science unit. Science is his favorite subject? Sophia asked. He loves it, Patricia interjected. Always asking questions about how things work, why the sky is blue, what makes plants grow. Just like his mama when she was little, always wanting to understand everything. Sophia looked up from her examination, catching Patricia's meaningful look. There was something in the older woman's expression that suggested she was beginning to piece together information that had been hidden from her. Dr. Bennett, Patricia said carefully, have we met before? You seem very familiar. Rebecca's face went pale.
Mama!
Dr. Bennett is just doing her job. But Patricia was not easily deterred. Rebecca used to talk about medical school, about her study partner Sophie, said she was going to be a pediatric surgeon someday. Patricia's eyes moved between Rebecca and Sophia with growing understanding. The revelation that evening, after Patricia had gone home and James was sleeping peacefully, Sophia found Rebecca in the hospital chapel. It was a small, quiet space with simple wooden pews and soft lighting that welcomed people of all faiths who needed a moment of peace in the midst of medical crises. Your mother knows, Sophia said, sitting down beside Rebecca. She suspects, Rebecca corrected. She's always been good at reading people. I think she's known for years that I wasn't telling her the whole truth about James's father. Are you going to tell her? Rebecca was quiet for a long time, staring at the simple cross on the wall. I don't know how to tell an 8-year-old boy that the doctor who just saved his life is his father. I don't know how to explain to my mother that I kept her grandchild's parentage secret for 8 years. And I don't know how to ask you to forgive me for robbing you of knowing your son. Sophia considered this carefully. Maybe we don't have to solve everything at once. Maybe we start with the truth and figure out the rest as we go. Building trust over the next few days as James recovered from his surgery, a routine began to develop. Sophia would make her morning rounds, spending extra time in James's room answering his endless questions about medicine and surgery. Rebecca would read to him in the afternoons and in the evenings. Sophia would often stop by again before heading home. James began to look forward to these visits from the doctor, who seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. He told her about his school projects, his favorite books, his dreams of becoming a doctor himself someday. "Do you think I'm smart enough to be a doctor?" he asked Sophia one afternoon. "I think you're one of the smartest kids I've ever met," Sophia replied. "Honestly, but being a doctor isn't just about being smart. It's about caring about people and wanting to help them feel better." "I do want to help people," James said seriously. "When kids at school get hurt on the playground, I'm always the one who gets the teacher and makes sure they're okay." "Tells me you have the heart of a healer," Sophia said. "The rest can be learned." The decision a week after the surgery, James was cleared to go home. His recovery had been smooth, and the additional genetic testing had revealed no immediate concerns, though it had confirmed the presence of genetic markers that would require long-term monitoring. "I want to see him again," Sophia told Rebecca as they prepared the discharge paperwork. "Not as his doctor, but as his parent." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I want that too. But Sophie, we have to be careful about how we do this. He's 8 years old, his whole world is about to change." "I know," Sophia agreed. "I don't want to disrupt his life or confuse him. But I also can't pretend I don't know he's my son." "What are you thinking? Maybe we start slowly. If I'm just Dr. Bennett, who has become a friend, someone who cares about him and wants to spend time with him. You don't have to put a label on it right away." The first step that weekend, Sophia found herself standing outside a small house in Rebecca's neighborhood, holding a children's book about the human body that she had picked up at the hospital gift shop. She had spent 20 minutes in her car trying to work up the courage to knock on the door. When Rebecca answered, she looked surprised but pleased. "Sophie, I wasn't expecting you. I brought James something," Sophia said, holding up the book. "I thought he might enjoy it." James appeared at his mother's shoulder, his face lighting up when he saw Sophia. "Dr. Bennett." "Mama, Dr. Bennett came to visit us." "I can see that," Rebecca said, stepping aside to let Sophia in. "Would you like some coffee?" The house was small, but warm, filled with pictures of James at various ages and the comfortable clutter of a life lived by people who cared more about each other than about perfect organization. Sophia found herself studying the photographs, seeing her son's life displayed in chronological order around the living room. "Is this you when you were my age?" James asked, pointing to a picture of Rebecca in a graduation cap and gown. "That's me graduating from college," Rebecca confirmed. "I was very young. You look like you were smart," James observed. "Were you going to be a doctor too?" Rebecca glanced at Sophia, who was listening intently. "I wanted to be, yes, but sometimes life takes you in different directions." "But you're still a nurse, and that's almost like being a doctor," James said loyally. "You help people get better too, new traditions." As the weeks passed, Sophia became a regular visitor to the Torres household. She would stop by on weekends, bringing books or science experiments that she could do with James. She taught him to look at cells under a microscope she borrowed from the hospital lab. She showed him how to take his own pulse and explained how the heart worked. Rebecca watched these interactions with a mixture of joy and terror. Joy at seeing her son connect with his other parent, terror at the complexity of the situation they were navigating without a roadmap. "He adores you," Rebecca told Sophia one afternoon as they watched James in the backyard, examining leaves with a magnifying glass Sophia had given him. "The feeling is mutual," Sophia replied. "He's an amazing kid, Rebecca. You've done an incredible job raising him." "I'd help," Rebecca said quietly. "My mom, my sisters, good friends. It takes a village, you know. But you were the constant. You were there for every scraped knee, every bad dream, every triumph. I can't even imagine how hard that must have been to do alone." The truth emerges one evening. Sophia was helping James with a science project about the solar system. He looked up at her with those serious green eyes and asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Dr. Bennett, why do you spend so much time with me? Don't you have other kids to take care of?" Sophia felt her heart stop. Across the room, Rebecca looked up from the dishes she was washing, clearly holding her breath. "I spend time with you because I care about you very much," Sophia said carefully. Sometimes when doctors take care of children, they develop special friendships with their patients. James considered this with the gravity he brought to all important matters. Do you think maybe you could be more than just my doctor friend? What do you mean? Sophia asked. Though she suspected, she knew where this was heading. Now James said, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes I wish I had a dad like some of the other kids at school. And sometimes when you're here, it feels like maybe I do have someone like that. Rebecca set down the dish she was holding and came to sit with them at the kitchen table. James, honey, what would you say if I told you that Dr. Bennett is actually more than just your doctor friend? James looked between the two women, his 80-year-old mind working to process possibilities that his young heart had already begun. To accept, you mean like she's part of our family? Something like that? Rebecca said softly. James, Dr. Bennett is your father. Understanding the words hung in the kitchen air like a revelation that changed everything and nothing at the same time. James looked at Sophia with new eyes, studying her features as if seeing them for the first time. You're my daddy? He asked. Quietly, yes, Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm your dad. James was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the adaptability that children possess. Finally, he looked up at both of them and asked, Does this mean Dr. Bennett is going to live with us now? Rebecca and Sophia exchanged looks over his head. They hadn't discussed living arrangements or what their relationship might look like going forward. They had been so focused on building a connection between Sophia and James that they hadn't addressed the practical implications of their situation. That's something we'll need to talk about, Rebecca said carefully. This is all very new for everyone. But she's not going to go away, right? James asked, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that made both women's hearts ache. Sometimes when people find out they have kids they didn't know about, they decide they don't really want them. Oh, sweetheart, Sophia said, reaching for his hand. I will never, ever go away. I may not have known about you before, but now that I do, you're the most important thing in my world. New family dynamics in the weeks that followed, the three of them began to figure out what their unconventional family might look like. Sophia started spending more time at Rebecca's house, often staying for dinner and helping James with his homework. She attended his school science fair, where his project on the circulatory system won first place. Rebecca and Sophia had long conversations about co-parenting, about how to blend their lives in a way that served James's best interests. They talked about the possibility of Sophia moving closer to their neighborhood, about shared custody arrangements, about how to explain their situation to James's school and to their respective families. Sophia told Rebecca one evening after James had gone to bed, school conferences, medical appointments, birthday parties. I want to make up for lost time. I want that too, Rebecca replied. But Sophie, we need to talk about us, about what we are to each other now. It was a conversation they had been avoiding, but it was inevitable. Their relationship had been interrupted 8 years ago by circumstances and choices that seemed impossible to navigate at the time. Now they were connected by their son. But their feelings for each other remained unresolved. Healing old wounds. I was angry with you for a long time, Rebecca admitted. Not for leaving, but for being so far away that I couldn't reach you when I needed you most. I was angry too, Sophia replied. Angry that you made such a huge decision without me. But I'm beginning to understand that you were doing the best you could in an impossible situation. We were both so young, Rebecca said. 21 and thinking we had all the time in the world to figure things out. And now, here we are, 8 years later, trying to build a family out of the pieces we have left. They were sitting on Rebecca's small back porch, watching James play with the neighbor's dog in the yard. The evening air was soft and warm, filled with the sounds of suburban life settling into nighttime routines. Do you think we can make this work? Rebecca asked. Not just as co-parents, but as a real family? Sophia was quiet for a long time, considering the question that would determine the shape of all their futures. I think, she said finally, that we owe it to James and to ourselves to try. The future 6 months after that fateful night in the hospital emergency room. The three of them were sitting around Rebecca's kitchen table planning James's 9th birthday party. He had requested a science theme, complete with experiments that guests could participate in. Can Dr. Bennett do the experiment where you make a volcano? James asked excitedly. And can she wear her doctor coat so everyone knows she's a real scientist? I think we can arrange that, Sophia said, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. Rebecca looked around the table at her unconventional family and felt a sense of completeness she hadn't experienced in years. It hadn't been easy to navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of blending their lives. But somehow, they had found a rhythm that worked for all of them. Sophia had moved to a house just 3 blocks away, close enough for James to walk back and forth between his parents' homes, but far enough to give Rebecca and Sophia the space they needed to rebuild their relationship as adults, rather than the college students they had been 8 years ago. I have something to tell you both, Sophia said, setting down her coffee cup. I've been offered a position as head of pediatric surgery at the children's hospital. James's eyes went wide. That means you'd be the boss of all the other doctors who take care of kids, something like that, Sophia confirmed. But it would also mean that I'd be staying here permanently. No more opportunities in other cities. No more wondering if I might get transferred somewhere else. Rebecca felt relief wash over her. The fear that Sophia might leave again, might disappear from their lives as suddenly as she had reappeared, had been a constant worry despite Sophia's reassurances. Does that mean you want to stay? Rebecca asked quietly. It means, Sophia said, reaching across the table to take both Rebecca's and James's hands, that I've found exactly where I belong. Epilogue. 1 year later, the pediatric surgery waiting room at San Francisco Children's Hospital looked exactly the same as it had the night that changed their lives forever. But everything else was different. Dr. Sophia Bennett, head of pediatric surgery, was preparing for another complex case when she received a text from Rebecca. James's school play is at 7 tonight. He's playing a doctor who saves the world from a rare disease. Sound familiar? Sophia smiled as she typed back. Wouldn't miss it for anything. Save me a seat. At home, James was putting the finishing touches on his costume, a white coat that Rebecca had helped him decorate with his name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. James Torres Bennett. Are you nervous about the play? Rebecca asked as she helped him adjust his stethoscope. A little, James admitted. But Dad says that being nervous just means you care about doing a good job. The casual use of Dad still made Rebecca's heart skip a beat sometimes. James had adapted to having 2 parents more easily than either of the adults had expected. Though there had been moments of confusion and adjustment for all of them, your dad is right about that, Rebecca agreed. You know that both Dad and I will be there cheering for you. That evening, as they sat in the elementary school auditorium, watching their son perform in his white coat and stethoscope, Rebecca and Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, if someone had told me this is where we'd be, ... double quotes, Rebecca whispered. I never would have believed it, Sophia finished. Sometimes the most important things in life come from the places you least expect. On stage, James delivered his final line with the confidence of a child who knew he was loved and supported. Sometimes being a doctor means fixing what's broken, but sometimes it means discovering something wonderful that was there all along. Audience applauded, but Rebecca and Sophia barely heard it. They were too busy watching their son take his bow, this little boy who had brought them back together and taught them that family isn't always about the choices you make, but sometimes about the choices that are made for you by love, by chance, and by the mysterious ways that broken things can heal into something stronger than they were before. After the play, as they walked to the parking lot together, James between his parents, swinging their hands and chattering excitedly about his performance. Sophia realized that she had everything she had never known she wanted. Ice cream to celebrate? She suggested. Can we go to the place with the really big sundaes? James asked hopefully. I think a really big sundae is exactly what this occasion calls for, Rebecca agreed, as they drove through the San Francisco evening toward the ice cream shop. James fell asleep in the back seat, still wearing his doctor costume. Rebecca and Sophia exchanged a look over his sleeping form, a look that contained 8 years of pain and separation, but also the promise of all the years ahead of them. Sometimes, most beautiful love stories begin with an ending and grow into something that was always meant to be.